important to understand what the 5G is doing and what they say it's doing. We're told on the IEEE beamforming document that this technology cooked your eyes like eggs in World War II. And you all need to understand these are military weapons. These are assault frequencies. If you garner nothing more than that, that's what you need to know. It's microwave radiation warfare, is what this is.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to the National Press Club Federal Communications Commission Chairman Tom Wheeler.
It's an honor to be here at the National Press Club. The first generation wireless 1G was voice. The second generation 2G allowed both talk and text. The third generation, 3G, the internet, in a limited way. And today's technology, 4G, completed that digital migration. But if anyone tells you that they know the details of what 5G is going to become, run the other way.
I have to tell people 5G is a killer. I'm Mark Steele. Anybody who hasn't heard me. I'm a weapons systems head-up display expert, one of the leading experts in the world. I've actually broke cover in relation to this. The reason I became an expert was because I invented them. What I'm going to say to you today, do not believe a single word I say. Not one. I want you to do your research. You'll find it's absolutely terrifying. You got your body card?
Aye.
Oh, good lad. Right, because I'm talking to that. This 5G roll-up is a weapon system. I've got a letter with central government because I know about weapon systems more than anything other.
In Britain, in a place in the north of England called Gateshead, a scientist there called Mark Steele has been very publicly and actively warning people about the effects of LED streetlights, which he says in Gateshead are emitting now 5G.
Right, what's the crack?
Yeah, lads. I'm just having a word with these Gateshead council workers about replacing these transmitters on these lights that are causing harm and assaulting the community. This is an existential threat to the economy, to the environment and humanity.
If these transmitters are everywhere, then everyone's...
There's a lot of confusion about what 5G is. The G stands for generation. So you started off with the first transmitter system.
Back in the 1980s.
In the 80s, yes. You had 1G, then you had 2G. And as the generations moved on, you started to see more complex signal systems, cleverer pieces of, antenna designs, etc., etc. So the whole thing became more data, quicker downloads, etc., etc. However, 5G is something completely different. Right, let's get a breakdown. Let's tell the people what this really is. This is the 5G transmission device. That's a hell of a beast, that, isn't it? These are the uninsurable transmitters. Just get a good look at that, guys, because obviously I know there's quite a few experts who want to see more detail about the transmitters and the chipsets. Just have a good look, boys. This is the control management system masquerade. There's an antenna there, you see that? What is this phased array antenna here? What's that? This is for phased array, alright? As you'll see, it's got a driver, it's got some chip there. It's one chip. Look at the chipsets on this. This is a dystopian world. What did Gateshead Council say? I'll tell you what, I think we better send some of these educated fools back to school, or just send them to prison, whichever's the easiest. I think prison's probably better. Alright, that's 5G, guys. That's 5G hardware.
You must consider the whole part played by electricity in nature. Human beings cannot go on developing in the same way in an atmosphere permeated on all sides by electric currents and radiations. It has an influence on the whole development of man. This life of men in the midst of electricity, notably radiant electricity, will presently affect them in such a way that they will no longer be able to understand the news which they receive so rapidly. The effect is to damp down their intelligence. Such effects are already seen today. Even today, you can notice how people understand the things that come to them with far greater difficulty than they did a few decades ago. Rudolf Steiner, 1924. Rudolf Steiner noted that in 1924, since then our atmosphere has become far more permeated with electric waves of widely diverse types. There's no doubt now that electric waves, electromagnetic forces, cause direct biological effects. There's thousands of peer-reviewed papers on this subject. There's no doubt about it. But what are these effects? How are they affecting us? What can we do about it? We're now at a stage where we're putting in what's called 5G, which is a special type of broadcast for high-density information transfers. And it turns out that this is the same frequency bands that are used in crowd dispersal weaponry.
5G, first and foremost, is densification. So it's significantly more transmitters in close proximity to a human, and it is also a sophisticated, illegal, unlawful transmitter. What I mean by that is it is a high-gain dielectric lens antenna, and what that allows 5G transmitters to do is to 3D map its environment in your home. The 868 megahertz frequency is specific for battlefield interrogation systems, so sub-gigahertz. It allows the signal to travel through concrete brickwork with ease, and it can actually data gather. It is a target acquiring system. Phased array is basically radar off the battlefield. It is extremely good at identifying targets and being able to lock onto targets. And not only that, it can specifically target you as an individual. So any judge sitting on an interesting case, let's say, any lawyer, any barrister, anybody doing any work that is potentially controversial, your life could be at threat. So the antenna design that you currently have on top of these LED streetlights, masquerading as a control management system, is basically battlefield interrogation equipment. The first phased array unit was actually called Mammoth, used by the Germans during the Second World War to identify Allied aircraft. Obviously things have moved on significantly since then.
Well, I joined the Royal Navy in 1960, and I specialised in microwave warfare. Radar, obviously, which uses microwave, but they don't just teach you radar, they teach you all about microwaves and other uses. So I understood about microwave warfare and how it can damage people, how it can harm people. Microwaves then were used as weapons, as they are today. It is a perfect stealth weapon, and when governments don't like a group of people, for instance, the ladies who protest at Greenham Common in England about the American missile base they camped. They were microwaved. We microwaved Catholics in Northern Ireland to make them sick. It goes on all over the world. And it's a weapon that you don't know you're being targeted because the dose is very, very low, which is actually more dangerous than a high dose. It's very, very low, and it may take a year or two, but you can cause neurological damage and cancers with low-level microwaves, and you can make all your opponents sick. It's a perfect weapon for a government.
Almost immediately, I had neighbours knocking on the door, talking about children bleeding from the nose. I had images posted on Facebook. And one neighbour in particular came to my door and mentioned the fact that since the LED street lighting had been installed, she was bleeding from the nose every single night. I thought it was unbelievable. However, I spoke to another neighbour who lived not far from the first lady who mentioned this, and she also confirmed that since the LED street lighting had been installed, she also had started to develop nosebleeds and had never had nosebleeds before in her life. That then put me on a journey to investigate. I measured microwave radiation levels from the transmitters on top of the LED streetlights. The basic 868 megahertz, it was significantly higher than the current Council of Europe 1815 resolution, which is a maximum of 600 millivolts. I've measured up to over 3,000 millivolts.
5 to 6 times higher than the guidelines.
Significantly higher than the current Council of Europe 1815 resolution, which states that 200 millivolts should be the maximum. The Bioinitiative report states that it should be significantly less than that. So we've got the Council of Europe. That's, the international criminal courts are stating that, the learned judges have said that 200 millivolts, and I'm measuring in bedrooms in Gateshead, minimum 600 and up to 4,000.
Does this mean that in 2020, 2021, when 5G is destined to roll out globally, that you're going to get those kind of readings everywhere all the time?
Everywhere all the time.
Worse than that?
Worse than that.
Yes, 5G will connect the Internet of everything. If something can be connected, it will be connected in a 5G world. Hundreds of billions of microchips connected in products from pill bottles to plant waterers, requiring massive deployment of small cells. We won't wait for the standards. Now, to make this work, the 5G build-out is going to be very infrastructure intensive. We must reject the notion that the 5G future will be the sole provenance of urban areas. The 5G revolution will touch all corners, and that's damn important.
To find no effect, and that's plagued this field in a number of countries.
The radio frequency radiation work that we did was supported by Motorola. The relationship was really very cordial and very stress-free, but only up until we started generating data. These folks were very, very upset and began to talk about how are they going to handle this, what sort of spin can we put on this, what can we expect from this, and from that point on the relationship changed. What we saw was that Motorola began to exert more and more control over the work, telling us what to do, telling us how to write abstracts, what to say in the abstracts, what to say in the papers, how to do the work. No, don't do this. Yes, do it this way. This was unacceptable. I had completed our study of DNA damage, and I submitted the final report to Motorola. They simply weren't willing to accept my interpretation of my study, my evaluation of my study, my knowledge of science at that point, and tried to urge me not to publish the study.
Did you hear about people coming to you as far as as far as having complaints about illness?
We were made aware of health complaints following installation of smart meters, and we wanted to verify this using our field work. So I measured the field of about 30 different people while they stood 1 foot in front of the smart meter, and in every single case, the human energy field was obliterated as they stood in front of the smart meter. So in our first slides, what we see is normal cells, and the structure of the cells is intact and sound. This is what we would expect from a normal sample. So after 2 minutes of exposure in front of the smart meter at about 1 foot away, we see a totally different story. Sample 1, you can see a lot of degradation in the cells. The cell walls have been broken, and you see changes in the cells which are called mycoplasma. It shows a mutation to the cell. In the second sample, we see a different type of degradation to the cell membranes. You can see a corrugation here. This is called bottle cap formation, and it's known that this occurs due to oxidation or exposure to free radicals. So this third subject, when we did her sample, she had to be pulled away from the meter after 45 seconds because she complained about an increasingly severe headache. And here you see a phenomenon called rouleau, where the red blood cells are stacking up, which makes it very difficult for the blood to deliver oxygen to the tissues as they would be their normal function. Every single one of these is a degradation. Every single one of these shows a trauma to the blood cells. And that came from something, and the only variable was the smart meter. The good news in all this is the patient and the blood can return to normal once they have been removed from the influences of these stressors.
Some of the effects that we can look at, well, one thing is just our regular Wi-Fi, 2.4 gigahertz. That's in the same range as microwave ovens, which are also called radar ranges, because that is radar. 2.4 gigahertz is interesting. It's not the peak absorption rate in water for microwave frequencies, but it's at a point where it allows full penetration, because if it came in at the peak, it would prevent the insides from getting warm. So that's with basic Wi-Fi. Now, when we look at 5G, 60 gigahertz, this is what they call active dispersal sort of weaponry, just keep people back. It burns the skin. It doesn't penetrate, but 60 gigahertz is the frequency of oxygen molecule absorption. Since they have electrons that they share with each other, what we breathe is actually O2, pair of oxygen. So being bombarded with 60 gigahertz could very well impair our oxygen absorption rate in our body, and thereby the whole basis of our living system. Martin Paul says, putting tens of millions of 5G antennas without a single biological test of safety has to be about the stupidest idea anyone has had in the history of the world. So assessing all this, we have experts in various fields: military EMF weaponry, biological effects on humans, firefighters that are getting cognitive impairment by being there in them, countries that are banning these sort of technologies around schools because of the impairment to cognitive. Let's weigh that up in light of what Rudolf Steiner said in 1924 about just mere radio causing the impairment of cognitive functions on people, that they can receive news from around the world, but they can't understand it as well because of the effect of the electricity. We have to say, something smells sinister here.
Number one, one, so it may not impact human DNA in laboratory experiments right now, and they're saying it doesn't impact human DNA. But given that human DNA is less than 1% of the cellular DNA in the human body, the rest of the cellular DNA is microbial, and we know that this will eviscerate microbial DNA. So we're talking about a takedown of the operating system of human beings.
Exactly. I couldn't have put it better myself.
John Brandt.
Good morning, Mr. Brandt. Wow, this is Amanda from Virginia.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, I've been trying to get a hold of you for months now. You guys are covering up chemtrails.
No, we are not covering it. We have no reason to cover up chemtrails.
Of course, you have every reason to cover it up. Every reason. It's called losing your job.
What reason will that be?
Oh, well, you personally, you would lose your job if you were to reveal anything to me, and it's probably unsafe for you to even be speaking about this, considering the types of individuals you work for.
It's not unsafe.
It is unsafe.
There's no problem with us talking on, you're a citizen, you're making a complaint.
Oh, Lord have mercy on myself.
It's a complaint in an area that we don't have authority to regulate.
So the connection between chemtrails and 5G.
It's all interconnected. The metallized particulates, that would allow the 5G phased array, so basically the radar that would allow it to be able to identify you, so it can watch you, it can identify you in your own home, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
For the last X amount of years, we've been through chemtrailing, and that is now the cat is out of the box. We've had these nanoparticulates raining down on humanity for years now, impregnating our bodies, by best account staying inside our bodies. Those nanoparticulates, what you're saying, are building up a kind of a phosphorescence glow capability so that we can be flagged up in our homes, behind concrete and steel, inside bunkers, in the basement, doesn't matter where you are. The 5G will be able to now triangulate, map, and read you, because you as a living being are impregnated with these nanoparticulates, which are acting as a kind of transmission and reception technology.
It's exactly, absolutely exactly.
I think anyone who puts Wi-Fi into a school should be locked up for the rest of their life. I really do. I think they're not fit to walk on the surface of this planet because they haven't looked at the research, and whatever incentive they have, it is not worth the genetic problems that parents are going to face with their children when they're born.
France has banned Wi-Fi in nursery schools and put warnings out for regular schools because they're finding there's impaired learning capacity in children when they're around Wi-Fi. And they have to put up warning signs where they put Wi-Fi transmitters.
When I got sick and I learned that they're putting Wi-Fi in the schools in Israel, I was very sick at the time, but I could not tolerate the thought that children in the schools will become as sick as I have. And after a few months of correspondence, I submitted a Supreme Court case in Israel to ban the use of Wi-Fi in the schools and replace them with wired network. The 4 top diseases that kill our children, our young adults right now, are brain tumors, thyroid cancer, testis cancer, rectal cancer, everywhere we put our cell phones. And a lot of our children are sick, and they're being misdiagnosed and mistreated because the wireless industry has put billions and billions of dollars in the past 30 years to mislead the public as to the health effects and keep the public uninformed.
We are performing an experiment on children. We are exposing children to microwave radiation for 6 hours during every school day. We have had absolutely no studies looking at the long-term effects of this radiation on young people or even on adults.
A considerable amount of research shows that developing brains and bodies of children are much more affected than adults. And there are clear indications of a link between increased electromagnetic fields and autism spectrum disorders.
We took 10 autistic children and went back to the sleeping location where the mother was when she was pregnant with their child and compared it with the sleeping location of a mother that gave birth to healthy children. We had 10 mothers in that group, 10 mothers in this group, and in the group of the autistic children, we found that the measurements that we got for the microwave exposure was elevated compared to the group of children that were normal. The fetus is affected. The exposure to man-made electromagnetic fields has become the first factor that could be isolated ever in autism that could predict autism.